Hi guys. So this is the story of Abraham Lincoln and Jesus Christ. And before I start that story, I have to tell you the story of Belshazzar. So Belshazzar was Nebuchadnezzar's son, and as you know, Nebuchadnezzar is the one that put the country of Judah into captivity. And Belshazzar one day thought it would be fun to take the bowls and the cups that were used in the temples in temple service and get drunk with them, with his friends. And needless to say, God was not amused. And what God did was He sent Belshazzar the apparition of a hand writing on the palace wall. And Belshazzar was offended because he couldn't understand that, and he called Daniel in, and Daniel could understand the writing, didn't want to tell him what it was. Belshazzar insisted, and so Daniel had to tell him that Belshazzar had been weighed, his life had been weighed in the balance, and he had been found wanting, and that he was going to forfeit his life and his kingdom. And within a few hours, Belshazzar was dead, and his kingdom was in the hands of an invader. So the reason I had to start with that story, so I had to start this story with another story, and the reason I had to do that was to tell you that God will not make a change in the course of a nation's history without first announcing it. Okay? This is one of the 10. This is one of. Well, God is a great king and a just king and a noble king, and He will not make a change unless He announces it. He used to use the prophets, but they killed the prophets, and so He had to use other ways. All right, so the year is 1809. Abraham Lincoln is born, and his family has gone into a contract with the Commonwealth of Kentucky, where if his dad and his family can clear an amount of land, a certain amount of land, and work it and make it workable and productive, then the family can keep the land. And if they can do that, then they're set for life. The family is established in Kentucky, and they'll be okay. But Lincoln's dad is a little pig-headed, a little obstinate, and through a series of fatuous blunders, and just regular pig-headedness and ignorance, he loses the land, and the family has to uproot and move to Illinois, where they have to start all over again, doing the same thing. Unfortunately, Illinois has a really tough winter, and the family suffered that. His mom ended up dying when he was 9 years old. Sorry. And his dad left him and his 11-year-old sister and went off to find another wife. And he was gone for 6 months, and Lincoln and his sister nearly died. They nearly starved to death. So Lincoln didn't appreciate his dad. He didn't appreciate what his dad did to his family, and he had a tough time. But he persevered. He had to work for his dad until he was 21 years of age on the farm, clearing the land and homesteading. And he didn't like it, but he studied, and he found out he liked being a leader. So he studied law, and he persevered, and he went through a lot of ups and downs in his life and a lot of setbacks, but he continued to persevere. And lo and behold, in 1861, Abraham Lincoln is elected president. So this is fantastic, right? But what should have been a fantastic, incredible blessing for Abraham Lincoln turned out to be a terrible curse, because no sooner had Lincoln been elected that the country tore itself in two over the what do I say? Crime is not a strong enough word. So strong, the national sin of slavery. Now, when the war first started at the beginning of Lincoln's term, no one in the country thought that the war would last more than 2 or 3 months, because the men had to come back. They were all farmers. Most of them were farmers, and they all had the whole country was completely tied to the land, and they all had to be back for the harvest. So no one thought, like, wow, this is crazy. This is an argument, and it's not going to last more than 2 or 3 months. But human nature took over, and before you know it, 4 years had gone by, and 600,000 men had been killed. So the year is 1865, and Lincoln has been campaigning for a second term, and just before the election campaign, the North begins to win some major battles. And although it hadn't looked good for a long, long time, Lincoln looks like he's going to get reelected, and lo and behold, there he is. He gets reelected for a second term. Now, at the party, Lincoln was celebrating at the White House for the party, and he was exhausted from the campaign, and he fell asleep on the couch in the room where they're having the party. And all the party goers, they understood. And what they did was the servants covered him with a blanket, and everyone slowly crept out of the room, and the servants and Mary went to bed. And Lincoln slept until the middle of the night. When he woke up, he realized he had fallen asleep at the party, and he got up and started to go off to his bedroom. And as he passed a full-length mirror, he looked at himself, his reflection in the mirror. Now, everything looked normal. He started at his feet, he looked up, and he's a tall guy, got all the way up to his full height, and he saw his face in the mirror, and everything looked normal, except to the one side there was another reflection of his face. And when he turned his face, the reflection would turn with him, but it was just a reflection of his face. And he stared at it for the longest time, and he couldn't understand. And he thought, well, maybe I'm dreaming, I don't know. So he went back and he lay back on the couch again, and he tried to put it out of his mind, but he couldn't. And so he got up and he looked at his reflection again, and everything was exactly the same as before, except this time the reflection was noticeably fainter. And as he stared at his face and the reflection, the second reflection off to the side, the reflection was getting fainter and fainter. So finally he went and he lay back down, and he didn't move again for the rest of the night. And he didn't sleep. The household began to wake up, and the servants woke up, and Mary woke up, and Lincoln went up and started to get ready for the day. But he told Mary about the dream. And Mary said, when she heard the story, she said, "Oh, hey, you've just been elected to a second term. What this dream means is that you were elected to one term, and you were able to serve out that term fully, but you've been elected to a second term, but you won't be able to serve out that second term completely." And Lincoln was shocked. He didn't understand why or how Mary could have said such a thing. And he was caught off guard. But Mary had said a lot of crazy things in her life, and he just tried to put it out of his mind. He had way too much to do. So he put it out of his mind, and he had to sit down and he had to write his second inaugural address. And he sat down, and I'm going to read them. So he sat down and he wrote these words. Fondly do we hope and fervently do we pray that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass. Yet, because the war was still going on, yet if God wills that it continue until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid for by another drawn with the sword, so as it was said 3,000 years ago, it must be said today, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Now, Abraham Lincoln, he loved to read the Bible, he loved to read scripture, and he studied the Bible, and he cared a lot about God. But he didn't understand, at least at that point, how prophetic those words would turn out to be, because God was trying to tell Abraham Lincoln that his blood would be required to seal up the payment for the national sin of slavery. Abraham didn't realize it at the time, but God was trying to get the message across to him that he was going to be the Passover lamb for the United States of America, for his people, over the sin, to atone for the national sin of slavery. So time goes by, and a few days go by, and his second term begins, and Abraham Lincoln has a second dream. And this one, it's about a ship coming into port at night. And it was a dream he'd had many times before. And sometimes the ship would pull in smartly. It was the dream was always in that night. It was always dark and gloomy. And but the ship would always pull in, either sometimes smartly, sometimes slowly, but it would always pull into port safely and dock. And Abraham Lincoln loved having that dream, because every time he had that dream, his life moved forward. Something important in his life would happen, and his life would move forward. So things are starting to look up for Abraham Lincoln. He had such a hard time, he and Mary, all the way into the White House and through the first 4 years of it, with the war and everything else. But things were starting to look up, and another few days go by, and the war is slowly drawing to a close, and he's at the War Office, and again he's exhausted from working all the time, and he falls asleep on a couch in the War Office. Now, he has a dream while he's asleep on the couch, and in the dream he's in his bed at the White House, and he hears someone crying. And the White House is completely still, it's nighttime, but he can definitely hear someone crying. So he gets out of bed, and when his feet touch the floor, they don't land on the carpet, they land on the cold floor. And the coldness of the floor shot through his body like a knife. And as he stood up, he could feel his blood running cold. And he started to walk through all the bedrooms on the second floor. And every time he walked into a room or through into the hallway, there was no one there. As he went from room to room, he's looking in the room. Every room is lit with a candle, but it's dark and it's gloomy and it's cold, and there's no one there. But he can hear someone crying. And he searched through all of the rooms on the second floor, and then he went down into the offices downstairs. And he started to search through the offices downstairs, and finally there's no one in each office. But then finally he came to the east room, and he looked in the room, and there in the middle of the room was a long low table with a body wrapped in linen, and around the body was an honor guard, and beyond the honor guard in the corner was a group of mourners crying. He looked at the sight. He couldn't understand what was going on. And he slowly crept over and he whispered to one of the honor guards, "Who is this that lies dead in the White House?" And the honor guard looked at him and said, "It is the president, shot dead by an assassin." Lincoln woke up like he'd been hit by a bolt of lightning, and he was covered in sweat. He couldn't forget the dream. The dream was all over his mind, and it shook him right down to the core. And he just got up and left and he walked home. And he tried to go back to bed, but he couldn't go back to bed. And he was rattled by the dream. At first he didn't tell anyone, but he couldn't keep it in. After a while, he started to tell a few of his friends, and I don't think he told Mary, I'm not sure. And the friends, of course, when they heard it, they didn't know what to say. But just like life goes on, and 3 days go by, a few days go by, a week goes by, a couple of weeks go by, and now it's Easter in Washington. And not only is it Easter, not only is it spring, but it's Easter and it's spring, and all the men are coming home. So the whole town is buzzing with joy, absolutely over the moon, excited, thrilled, incredibly happy and relieved that the war is finally over. So he wakes up on Friday, and it's going to be Easter weekend in Washington. And the Lincolns decide to go for a carriage ride because they have the day off, and they've set aside this day for themselves, and they are off with Lincoln driving the carriage. And everywhere they go, everyone is shouting out cheers for the president and applauding and stopping and applauding. Everyone, it's just absolutely thrilled when they see him, and just so glad and so happy and have such a wonderful day. And they cap it off by going to the theater. Now, they say that as Booth crept towards Lincoln in the darkness, Lincoln was looking down and to the left, and he was in a rocking chair, but he wasn't rocking. He was leaning forward on the chair, and he was looking down to the left, and he was laughing at what was happening in the play. Now, do you know why the lost tribes of Israel became lost? It's because God's holy days are relevant. They're meaningful. And they mean something to the individual, to the family, to the community, and to the nation. Each and every one of them. And the most meaningful of all the holy days is Passover. But the lost tribes of Israel didn't want to keep God's holy days, and especially didn't want to keep Passover, because it was hard. It was hard to keep Passover. In the days before Jesus Christ came, the tribes, they had to take the firstborn of all the lambs, the choice, the finest of, the pick of the litter of all the lambs. And for at least 4 days before Passover, sometimes because of the way the birthing went, and sometimes like it would be more than 4 days. It would sometimes be weeks. And uh, they had to bring the lamb into the house and keep the lamb in the house with them. Now, if you bring a lamb into a house, uh, what's going to happen? The kids are going to play with the lamb. The adults are going to, the grown-ups are going to play with the lamb, because the lamb is gentle and kind and innocent and loving and beautiful and fun and just everything just that is so amazing about life is wrapped up in an innocent little lamb. Of course, everyone falls in love with the lamb. But on Passover evening, the head of the household had the terrible duty of sacrificing the lamb, and the family would have to cook it quickly and eat it standing up. And they had to do this because it was a remembrance of God passing over their sin, of forgiving their sins. And they had to do it every year, because they had to every year they had to realize just how terrible sin is, and how the penalty of sin is death, and death is not fun. So it was a meaningful, very meaningful and very relevant holy day, but the tribes of Israel didn't want to keep it. Instead, they kept Satan's counterfeit, Easter. And have you ever noticed that we eat a chocolate bunny or a chocolate chicken or a chocolate egg on Easter, but we don't eat a chocolate lamb? No one makes a chocolate lamb. You know why? Because Satan doesn't want the lost tribes of Israel stirring up these old memories in the national psyche, in case the nation remembers just how great a heritage they have left behind. And so you'll never see a chocolate lamb at Easter. Now, Booth, he only had one shot. He had a single shot revolver, and he had a knife, but he didn't want to use it because it was messy and it wouldn't kill. He knew he had only one chance to kill Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln, do you know why the lamb gets brought in? Because the lamb has to be convinced of the family's love and the innocence of the family. And the lamb is innocent. It believes everything. You know, there's no reason for it not to believe. So when the lamb is sacrificed, it's calm and happy and loving. And that's why Jesus Christ made sure that the lamb is brought into the household before Passover comes. And at the moment of Abraham Lincoln's death, although the lives leading up to that moment had been filled with torturous pain and terrible sacrifice and all kinds of mental anguish, at the moment of his death, Abraham Lincoln was smiling and laughing and happy, because although Booth didn't know it, Booth was an actor in God's plan, in carrying out God's plan. And he had to sacrifice Abraham Lincoln's life without breaking any bones. And so, although he thought he was just making a kill shot, in reality, he was sacrificing Abraham Lincoln without breaking any of Abraham Lincoln's bones. And when he pulled that trigger, the Passover lamb had been sacrificed, and the family, the nation of the United States of America could now mourn because their lamb had been sacrificed. But in the larger scheme, the nation had been, the sin of the nation had been atoned for. The North and the South would join together to become a nation, never to be split apart again. they are made ready to take up the mantle of world leadership. They became this, the sacrifice of Abraham Lincoln qualified the United States of America to move forward in history and become the leading nation of all the nations in the world. And that's what happened in history. The British Commonwealth started to fall back, and the United States of America became the leading nation. So that's the story of Jesus Christ and Abraham Lincoln, and how Jesus Christ worked with God's servant Abraham Lincoln to qualify the United States to become the leading nation. All right. So, good night, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.